Hi, everybody. Welcome to the September 30, 2016 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web-exclusive production here on Channel 12. I'm your host, Dominic Izzuti. Thank you very much for joining us. A quick take on the U.S. Supreme Court announcing this week that it has agreed to hear arguments regarding a Colorado case where Douglas County Schools is being accused of not providing an adequate education for their autistic child. Pat Cahoon from Westward. Colorado has a case that gets to the Supreme Court. This is well-trodden ground for us. This is a big deal. What impact do you think this case will make now that it's being heard at the U.S. Supreme Court?
Well, it's going to depend on what the U.S. Supreme Court decides, but in the meantime, Douglas County is facing several other challenges. They have to replace the board. They have board member. They have to make sure their board members kind of get along. They have the whole voucher issue coming up. So this decision is going to affect not just Douglas County, really, but any school district that has to supply an equal education, and at what level does that equal education have to reach, especially depending on the different kids. So it's a fascinating issue, and the Supreme Court is taking up another Colorado cause, which is people who are convicted, their convictions are overturned, can they get their fees back? So we're going to be watching two really interesting cases that will affect that one specifically Colorado, and I think the Douglas County case could have ramifications nationwide.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School, you're our esteemed lawyer at the table, and you have actually been part of the arguments of a case at the Supreme Court. So you know this extremely well, where Douglas County School is going to find themselves theoretically in a few months. What do you think of the case being brought against them?
Well, I think it's a good case for the Supreme Court to take to give a national answer about a national law. The federal statute says that if your public schools, you get federal aid, which is all of them, you have to give children with handicaps an appropriate education. And some courts, like the 10th Circuit and many others, said, well, you know, exactly what does that mean? And they said, well, it means you got to try, you got to do something. You know, it's got to be non-trivial, but it doesn't mean you have to come up to the highest possible standard of what you could do. And the statute also says, and if the school doesn't give you that appropriate education, then the parents can send the kid to a private school, and the school district has to pay the parents back for their tuition. So for this particular autistic child, Douglas County was trying to do something, but it wasn't working well enough from the parents' point of view, and so they put him in a special school for autistic kids, and he did much better. You know, not surprisingly. Does the federal law mandate that every time that happens, the taxpayers of the school district have to pay for it, or not? And is this a decision for the courts to make, or should they say, well, let's leave it where it is and let Congress be more specific if they want to? That's the issues that we'll get some answers to from the court.
Eric Sonneman, political analyst. Douglas County has been in the eye of the hurricane for a while. I mean, they were looked at as the champions of reforms a few years ago. That was controversial. Voucher programs, board issues, superintendent issues. Now they're going to be facing the U.S. Supreme Court. A tough time to be in Douglas County.
A lot of that they brought on themselves, and that's not to suggest they were wrong on many of those issues, but it was conscious decisions on their part. I'm not sure this one was a conscious decision to be at the epicenter of a U.S. Supreme Court case. Somebody needs to be at the epicenter, as has been pointed out, to get a clear direction from the court on this. There is this streak among many in this country, and particularly in public education, of what I call egalitarianism, and often egalitarianism run amok, which is that no student should have an opportunity that is not available to every student. And I think that ultimately doesn't lead you to where you want an excellent public education system to lead you. Obviously, you want every kid to have access to a top-flight education. But that doesn't mean that if a gifted and talented student shouldn't be able to go a little further, et cetera. And obviously there are special needs kids on all ends of the spectrum. To David's point, I largely agree. I actually think the word voucher, even though this case is completely different than the voucher case coming out of Douglas County, the two strike me as related, which is clearly Douglas County has an obligation to provide an education for this child, or at least to pay for an education. The question is whether they have to be the provider of that education, or if somebody else is able to do it better, Why can't that someone else do it better and the Douglas County taxpayers write the check?
Justine Sandoval joins us, a political activist. When you see this case going to the U.S. Supreme Court, even though I think a lot of folks are going to be waiting to see what the results or what the actual judgment will be from the U.S. Supreme Court, do you think other school districts, at least in Colorado, will take note of this and maybe do some preemptive action to try to take care of maybe different special needs kids in their districts, just so, maybe looking in advance of what's going on with this case?
Absolutely. I wasn't surprised that this case came out of Douglas County, but growing up, I have a younger brother who's autistic, and I watched my parents struggle to be able to make sure that he had the adequate education he needed. And they had took him out to another school that was supposedly a better school, but they do not, a lot of times they don't want to deal with the issues of a special needs child coming in. And they had to fight very hard and advocate and find different schools and navigate the system in order to get him the education that he needed. And I think that a lot of parents maybe don't have the skills or maybe can't navigate the system as well as my parents were able to advocate for my younger brother. And this case will be able to bring us back to have a conversation about what it means to provide education for special needs students. Things have really changed in the last few years when it comes to how we understand autism, how we understand children with developmental disabilities, and this Supreme Court case, I think, will bring that conversation up again and make it a national issue where we really talk about how we provide education to students with special needs.
That's all the time we have for Colorado Inside Out postgame this week. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.